Today we are joined by Heath Pearce. Heath, you spent 5 seasons in MLS, several other seasons overseas in Europe, 35 caps for the USMNT. You're also apparently, I learned this recently, a musician and a marketing professional, and now an analyst for MLS Season Pass on Apple TV. How do you have time to do all of these things?
Oh, I don't. I've just become very. First of all, thanks for having me. But second of all, I've become just very average at a lot of things, and I realized that was probably the case in my career too, where it was just like do a position until I get to the point where I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna have to work really hard to get better at this, or just start a new position where the instant gratification of like learning a new instrument or doing something new is like the growth curve is great and it's all the fun stuff. Whereas like once you get into the minutia of things, that's where I tend to check out.
I think I suffer from that same affliction, but
Mm-hmm.
luckily you are handsome and charming, so you were able to move into media after your playing career. I was thinking about this when kind of researching you, that a lot of players, like to be frank, seem like kind of boring people,
Mm-hmm.
and you're one of the players that seems to have like a lot of personality, other interests outside of the game as well. And I was looking back on like your national team teammates. There were a lot of guys like that in your era in the national team.
That were boring or not boring?
No, that were not boring, that
Oh
had
yeah,
personality.
we've got quite a few, and it's been interesting um, to sort of like see the evolution of wherever everyone's gone in their career. I particularly chose at a certain point to retire from my career so I could get into the next thing, and I never wanted to be. And unfortunately, I've dealt with this a lot with people in the context of this is I never wanted to be sort of forced out of the game where you're sort of like they kick you out and they lock the door and you're sort of like, what do I do now? This is all I've
Yeah.
ever known. Because when you're in that tunnel vision, it's really hard to think about anything else, right? Because when you do, you think you're not giving your all to the game and you feel like you're losing this edge. And so I knew I wanted to get into to media at a certain point, and so I kind of just took the leap at one point when I was sort of figuring out, do I want to? I had a couple options throughout Europe and Asia. I was playing in Gothenburg, and then this thing came across my life that I was like, you know what, I kind of want to try something new. Tried it for a little bit and never looked back. So it's been a pretty fun journey, and of course there's times that I'm like, I should have probably played another 7 years, but I'm also like, this is pretty fun, and I feel lucky to have the life that I have.
Isn't Graham Zuzi your age?
Graham Susie's a little bit younger, but he's 2 years younger than me. And so we crossed paths as I was sort of transitioning out of the national team. He was making his way into the national team. But yeah, technically we should be fighting for like the same job right now, and or he should be retiring. He's 36. He's past it too.
It's
Come on.
time.
Yeah, it's time.
Yeah. Well, you also have the coolest setup of anybody we've interviewed in person before, I'm pretty sure. And I want to ask you about one thing: the USA record over your left shoulder. It's like, is that playable?
It's I mean, if you put it on a turntable, it would spin. There just won't be any music on it.
Okay.
So I mean, you could put a plate on a turntable and it'll spin. So technically,
It is playable. It just
it is
won't make any
playable.
sound.
It's got a hole in the middle. It won't make a sound. I do wish it was playable. But yeah, it was a poster series that the marketing company that I run did with US Soccer during the qualifiers heading into the last World Cup on the men's side. And there was like sort of a design on it and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I kind of just liked it. And so I put it up on the wall.
I love that. Okay, so you're cool, and we've established that really well. But we also have you on here for another purpose, and that is to preview the Austin San Jose match coming up this weekend. So you're going to be on the call. This will be your second straight Austin call, correct?
Correct.
And hopefully you'll get a little bit more excitement, I think, from this one maybe than you got from the last one, or adventure. Like, how is it
Uh,
calling a game like that Austin LA Galaxy match?
oh man, from the Austin side, probably not all that fun compared to any game you called for Austin last year. Anybody that was lucky enough to get an Austin game last year got goals galore and excitement and energy, and especially in a home stadium. That's the thing I'm most excited about, is to sort of see that atmosphere. I've been to Austin only one time when the U.S. played against Jamaica in World Cup qualifying. I was in the stadium for that match, and I just remember thinking like, oh well, it's a national team match. What kind of fans will show up, right? And it was rocking in there.
It is
And I
a
know
much different flavor between the national team games and the Austin FC games. It really does feel different. There, I was at that game as well, and it was exciting, but felt way different from what
oh
an Austin
yeah.
game does.
Oh, for sure. And you can't even begin to like, you're going to have some overlap. You're going to have the traveling fan. You're going to have all these things. But I'm really excited to be in that stadium and feed off that. Because when you're in the booth, like a lot of it is about the energy happening around you, right? That makes the excitement when you feel a swing in the game. The sport is at a point now in the U.S. where if you're playing in Austin and Austin is starting to take control of the game, the fans know, right? And you can feel this building of an energy happening where you can feed off that in the booth, and you can say you can feel like something's coming. It's happening, and it's not just what you're seeing on the field, but it's that energy around that. So I'm really excited to be there and be a part of it. And hopefully we get an exciting game.
Yeah, well, let's get into the San Jose side of things a little bit. I think they're probably doing better than almost anybody predicted. I don't know if they have a laminator yet, like Austin had last year, but they were not expected to finish that high in the West. Currently in fifth in the West, very dangerous still, and a lot of it due to Christian Espinosa and Jeremy Abobasi. Like, where do you see the improvement coming out of this club from this year as opposed to last year?
Sometimes it's just about trust of a new coach. It's about getting more reps together, but they've been fantastic. What they haven't been, though, is good on the road. And so that's a good thing for Austin. They haven't won a game yet on the road this season. They've been very good at home, but that doesn't always apply, obviously, coming off of that loss to Real Salt Lake, a team that you would have expected them to beat at this point in the season, considering the form that they're in. But on the road is a different conversation. But Espinosa and Abobasi and Cowell, to be quite frank. I mean, when you think about an attack like that, where they can hurt you from either side, and you're not necessarily forcing it down one side or the other, and the fact that Espinosa can roam, I think it's definitely going to be something difficult for Austin FC on this one.
And looking at kind of other changes, last season they fired their coach Almeida after I think 7 games. Watching that team immediately after that, you could like the coach was gone, but like Almeida had baked that insanity into them, and I think it took them a while to kind of work their way out of it. I feel like Luchi Gonzalez has gotten them out of that a little bit and was able to reprogram them. They also brought in some more players like Carlos Grueso in the midfield. Natan went down with an ACL injury in preseason. They instantly traded for Jonathan Mensah from the Crew, so maybe that has helped some as well. Do you think that Luchi Gonzalez has been able to train the Almeida out of them? And if so, like, what does that new form look like?
Yeah, I mean, you just mentioned 3 players right up the spine, right? When you talk about Abobasi, the spine of any team is just so important when you talk about right up the middle of just that foundation of knowing where's your back line, who sets that back line, who's in charge of that back line. Menz is a player with enough experience to own that back line next to Rodriguez. And then when you get into the midfield, you mentioned it, Grueso, another player. It's just so important to have that trust and that belief that your top players, if they're coming up through the middle and the way that they move, at least being difficult to play against defensively and transition moments. So I feel like for any team, when you start to build that strength through the spine of your team, and then you add pieces or at least reinforcements when you think about how you build a team, I think the Luchi's done a great job of doing that first part of like, how do we become difficult to play against? And then the next part is the belief. I mean, they're playing right now with the belief that they can beat anybody. And it's weird how that works, like you said, where it's almost like you have to unwind some bad habits or a certain way or a mentality of playing. And now they have a real belief in themselves that not only can they win on their day, but they almost are playing with a chip on their shoulder as if they were written off early on in the season. We've seen that from a lot of teams. And you get that first win, and then you get the next win, and then you get the next one. You start to go, okay, we're no longer just this chip on the shoulder team with a new coach and people saying it's going to take time for us to figure it out. We believe is a contender.
Oh, Landon, am I asking the next question? Sorry.
Yeah, you are.
Okay. We'll edit all this out. Yeah, I don't know if you've followed sort of the history that these two teams have, Heath, but like it's been a little bit chaotic. Like it's been kind of high scoring, and I think what landed in like 2021, like Brad Stuver shoved a guy and almost knocked him over. Like, was it that San Jose?
I think it was, and Julio Cascante tried to pick a guy up and roll him off the field at one point. Jeremiah, I don't know if you know this. This is a piece of trivia I looked up before. Do you know what the record in this matchup is all time?
I do not know what that is.
It's for Austin, it's 0 wins, 3 draws, and 2 losses. So Austin has never won in 5 games, and all of the games have been pretty crazy. Like I think there was even like a 0-0 one that was like pretty wild for being scoreless.
That was the very first Austin FC home game, I think. Was the
Yeah, you're
0-0
right. You're right.
San-
Yeah.
So we've got a lot going into this. I guess like, but do you see that, Heath? Like, is there any kind of rivalry that you hear about or that you hear people talking about? Because they have been kind of it's been a lot going on in the matches between these two.
Yeah, I think interestingly, Austin is creating their, especially last season, right? You go into last season and it completely changes the present and future of the club in terms of the expectations and what they're trying to, just the new standard, right? I look at what was happening last year with LAFC, and it went from being like, oh, LAFC is the team, to being like, okay, there's something natural happening here. San Jose, similarly, I remember those incidences that you're talking about. I don't remember anything particular about that, but the players are going to remember, and the players are going to use that. And you don't look too much into it when you're playing, but you start to create almost a culture of teams that you compete against that you know are going to be hard, and almost the stereotypes play into your own head when you're on the field of like, oh, this is going to be a tough battle. It might get a little testy. The first challenge, don't get caught up in the emotion of it all. And now, again, I've never been to an Austin FC match inside the stadium during the league, and I can only imagine that when things get heated in there, just when that crowd plays into it, just how difficult it can be for an away team.
Yeah. Well, another thing that was Austin related, we kind of forgot about it until we were looking stuff up, is you had some early inside information on this Reyna Berhalter drama between the national team. So now Claudio Reyna is relegated to a lesser role, seemingly just a name. Do you think it's something like that? Is there a potential effect on Austin FC from how that all shakes out and sort of where Claudio is now? And like, as an Austin fan looking for somebody to blame for things, like, is there some story there that we can hang our hat on?
Hey, you got 3 attacking players that were stars last year, not playing well this year. So if I was looking to point fingers, you would have you could do that temporarily. But no, I mean, look, I don't see. I mean, maybe to the signings themselves, but those signings were rewarding last year, right? That are not playing well this year in terms of performances with Frigoni or Drusi or whoever. Like, these are guys were world beaters last year, and so it'd be tough to associate that or attribute that to Reyna drama. In fact, it looked like really fantastic signings back then, right? And this year, just not really seeing that final output just yet. And so I think we're probably too far removed to see anything connected to that, but probably at the time it shook some things. But you got a Josh Wolf who I played with on the national team at certain points and has good head on his shoulders, and so I would assume things like that get addressed pretty quickly, and you come together around difficult moments within a club.
So you've played on quite a few different teams in different countries, different situations. Have you ever played on a team that was in a funk like this that just seems like it's just broken?
Yeah, I have. It's weird because looking at the game against the Galaxy, I mean, the Galaxy were breaking lines of pressure with passing with ease, right? And when I think about Austin's midfield, in theory, a very difficult team to play through, a very difficult team to just find easy gaps. And when you look on paper, you go, okay, this is a good matchup, but they just couldn't seem to get on the same page. And I think there needs to be some change, right? When I think about even as Austin went to some of the veteran players towards the end of the game, it brought a different energy, right? A different, like, a belief of like, the least we can do is run really hard and chase everything and go after what we can and battle and compete. And I think that came towards the end of the match surprisingly. But yeah, sometimes it's broken. Something that was working before. You're also looking at a team where you get the free pass last year in terms of preparation, right? You're like, oh, is it a phase? Yeah, they're over indexing in a lot of ways. They're overperforming in a lot of ways. It's sustainable, obviously, an incredible run, almost nearly to a final. And then this year, teams play you a little bit differently, right? They play you a little bit more strategically. They respect you a hell of a lot more, to the point where they're spending all week thinking about you and figuring out where the loopholes. Now there's a little bit of I guess a form dip. Now there's a belief that they can get all points against Austin. So it's that sort of domino effect of things happening. But when you still look on paper and you look at the quality that the team has, you just go, it's just one of those things. I mean, you look at the Galaxy and they were winless going into that game, but they still had a few moments. They had some good control of the game, passing, and you connect that to a preseason game that I had with them, and I was like, oh yeah, looks like the same team as that I had for their last preseason game. But then there's this gigantic gap in the middle where they're knocking on the door, it's not working. You're changing players, you're trying to make it work, and I feel like Austin's in a little bit of that right now. Of just, it feels just a little bit off, like the metronome that made them so good, the rhythm, the ball possession, the clinical finishing. One of those things has to fall, and then it'll all sort of fall into place in terms of a belief in what can be accomplished this season.
I want to talk, like, while we have a player here, the coaching staff and players have been saying, like, if we can just get one goal, like, we think we'll start getting more. Is that real? Because that felt true in the first few games when we were creating chances. It doesn't really feel true anymore. One goal feels like a fluke at this point.
I mean, it's hard to say, because it's weird when you've given up now, what is it, 12 goals so far this year? But you're talking about a back line that I think Joshua's pretty happy with, right? Like,
they haven't been bad.
Defense is playing great. Yeah,
haven't been bad.
Stewart's a fantastic goalkeeper, and he's making these huge saves, and the team's making these great plays, and the movement around is great. But then you go, well, if it's not that, then what is it? And weirdly, the same messaging was coming from Greg Vanney in terms of, if we can just get the first goal, if we don't have to fight our way back into games, if we can do all these things. And I felt like there was this rounding of a corner of them sticking to their beliefs and how they want to play and what they want to do, but also bending a little bit to taking what the game gives them and where they're going to get their space and how they're going to execute. But then when those goals came, there was like this whole, like, oh yeah, we actually believe we can score, we can create chances. And so I do think that is a big part of it. I don't think it's just like about scoring a goal. I do think it's about some sort of play that can transform a season, right? What's 8, 10, 12 passes, build up play, the rhythm, the timing, the passing. When you see a good goal happen, it's not always because the ball gets put up into the top corner or some sort of fantastic finish. When you're on the field, even in training, right, and you connect these crisp passes where it's in, back, out the other side, and an overlap, and there's just these patterns of play that happen where everything happens in a very smooth way, that's where the belief changes, because you bring that attack to a conclusion, you score that goal, and you're like, okay, we've got this thing back about us that's working. And I think it can be transformational. I mean, it's easy to use that as a crutch sometimes, or to stereotype that type of thing. If we could just get a goal. But there is some things that can happen within that can truly change a match, as well as a belief in a team and what they're capable of.
All right. Well, listeners and viewers, Heath will be on the call on MLS Season Pass on Apple TV, partnered with Mark Rogandino, who we spoke with last week. Heath, enjoy Austin. I'm glad you're getting to come and hang out.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm really excited for more warmth here in California. It hasn't been that warm. I'm excited about this atmosphere, to be honest with you. One of my favorite parts about being part of MLS Season Pass this year is getting to go into these stadiums and experience them firsthand, and as a neutral, calling the game and calling it in a way that the game starts to tell its own story. And yeah, from what I've heard and what I know and what I've seen on TV in the past, it's one of the best atmospheres in the league. So I can't wait.
Yeah, we can't promise good soccer, but we can promise a good atmosphere.
Yeah, we'll put on a good show for you regardless.
I like that. I can take that.
All right. Thanks, Heath. We appreciate it.